What would change if you were a better coach as well as a manager or a leader? I would put / leader, but I think that's an interesting question, is what would change if you were a better coach and manager at the same time? Like, what would that look like? I have two people that came to mind as I was preparing for this week, just to launch into some content around this. And the two people that came to mind were Ann Klein and Frank Haas. These are two people that had a profound impact on my life. And the reason why, I'm not going to tell you the whole story of their investment in me, but there are 4 questions that came to mind that those two people asked me, 2 each, that really had a profound impact on me. And they were questions. It's funny that the thing I remember when I go back to those 2 people is the first thing that comes to mind. And one of them would have primarily defined their role as coach, and the other would have, I don't know if they would have called themselves a mentor in my life, but they certainly were. But the 4 questions were this, and I'm not going to give you all the context. I'm just going to tell you, these were huge for me. One question was this: what is your next? One of them asked me, what is your next, Rob? And I ended up going away for a week and writing all that down. The other question I was asked was, what have you accomplished? Without being shy about it or holding back, I want you to write down everything you accomplished. What have you accomplished? A third question was this: is Rob ready for a change? That was a profound question that one of these people asked me. That was this amazing coaching moment in my life. And then the last one is this: have you talked with your wife, Jackie, yet? Was another question that they asked. And these were really important. I look back and I know all the story around those questions and some of their linkage together. So my hope is that as I'm talking about coaching and mentoring, that will inspire some things in you and each of us. I'm working on this to become better coach leaders. So I spent years coaching my sons. I have 2 sons that are now freshmen and sophomore in college, and coaching my kids in soccer and basketball. So it was one of my developmental goals. It was actually a part of my WiLD toolkit way back, was like, I'm going to coach each of their teams each year through much of their childhood. I actually had a young man named Max who came up to me. I was at his, he had come back from college, and all these freshmen were back this summer. And he came up to me and he said this like made my day. He said, "I will never forget the 3 C's, Rob." And then he said, and I said, "What were they, Max?" This is a kid. He's remembering from 6th grade, right? Now he's a freshman in college. It was the 3 C's were competence, conviction, and connection. And I tell you that because I did something that I'm not super proud of, but I'm going to share it with you. I used to lie to my players, and this is the little lie that I told. So if you don't know it, I'm a bit of a University of Kentucky fan. And if any haters are out there, I will forgive you. You're forgiven for all that hatred, for all the different reasons you might. But I used to what I would take to practice is this shirt, UK 2K. And some of you have no idea what this means. And what's awesome is on the back, look at the back. University of Kentucky, the greatest tradition in college basketball. And so here's what I would tell my players. I would say, you know what this means? All right, fellas, here's what this means. The University of Kentucky was the first college team in history to have 2,000 wins, right? So that's what I opened with. And they were all getting an education on Wildcat basketball. So I would tell them that, go Big Blue. So then I'd show them the shirt. I'd wear the shirt every time the first practice, and I'd say, do you know how they did that? Do you know how the University of Kentucky, here comes the lie. Do you know how they got 2,000 wins? It was 3 things. It was 3 things. Competence, connection, and conviction. And Max remembered this. And so here's the thing. What I told him was, I said, the skills matter. The skills matter. I said, you're working on your basketball skills or your soccer skills. That will be critical to our effectiveness as a team. I said, conviction matters. And what I mean by that, everybody, is I mean, when you come to play or to practice, you show up like you mean it, like it matters. This is Coach Rob talking right now. By the way, I also brought this. Some of you are like, okay, enough with the coaching gear. Here's my last coaching sweatshirt. See, coach. So then I would say, and the last thing I would say is this, I'd say connection. We do this together. This is going to require us to figure this out and to work together. So that was the speech I would always give. And what's interesting about coaches, if you think about the greatest coaches you have, because I think in some ways, in the whole coaching infrastructure around executive coaching and leadership coaching, I think sometimes we've lost track of some of the things that where coaching actually came from. We know what coaches do and who they were. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but let me give you some of the things that coaches provide. I hope this tracks. If you think about, just imagine one of the greatest coaches in your life. For those of you that had a coach in any place or some kind of a key teacher, here's a couple of things. And I'm going to give you some examples. I have a list of 11 things, and I'll go through them pretty quickly. But one of the things that coaches provide is structure. So they typically provide a learning structure, and they also provide wisdom. So they brought wisdom and understanding of our context, like what it is that we're working on. And my example of this is I went back when I was looking at my coaching notes from when I was a basketball coach, and I found all of the practice structures. Like I would write down, like, here's going to be the practice, all you second graders. You know what I mean? So it was like I had to map out the outline for what practices were going to look like each time. And it was funny. It had like, we're going to work on dribbling for this many minutes. We're going to work on passing. I have my notes. Pair up for chest passes. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Pair up for bounce passes. We had the dribbling part was, I have my notes and what I was trying to teach them that. But it was also interesting because we're also trying to pass on wisdom in those same moments as well. So that was my reason for, when I talked about competence, conviction, and connection, you all know, I was also thinking about preparing them for life as second graders. I was thinking about, these are things that I hope that they carry forward. I hope that Max remembers, and I can't believe that he did. Here's another thing though. The third thing is that coaches invest in us for the long game. It's fascinating. They saw us for more than what we were doing right at the moment when they were coaching us. This is my third thing. So I ended up coaching in high school, my sons on their select soccer team. One of the greatest years of coaching I've ever had for me and for my wife was the year that I coached both of my sons on the same select soccer team. And she loved it because I'm the one taking her to practice every time now. So it wasn't a shared job, because if your coach is like, you're taking both the sons, get in the car, and we're gone. But it was interesting because there were moments in terms of the long game where I was also had my eye on teaching them things that might stand forever, that might actually teach them something forever. And I know there's a couple of soccer coaches, at least one on here, who has tremendous expertise. So if I get outside of the bounds of my skill set and expertise, I understand that. By the way, when I was coaching high school soccer, I don't know soccer as well as I needed to coach those boys with their level of expertise. So I had a professional trainer who I coached with. I was the head coach. And then this other trainer was bringing that tremendous depth of knowledge in soccer. But I had this experience where I would say this to the boys, and I don't actually have data to support this, but this is what I experienced. I asked them this. I pulled them over. One day we were down 3-0 at halftime. I pull the boys aside, and I said this. I said, do you know where most goals are scored? And they were all kind of thinking about it. And I said, most goals are scored against us on the far post. And what I mean by that is they're away from the ball. So the opposite, where the ball's coming down the left side of the field, most of the goals ended up scoring on the far side of the field. And what I was seeing was that all the boys were looking at the ball. So as the ball's coming down one side of the field, every one of the players is just staring at the ball with zero awareness that there is a right winger flying down the field who is wide open, and no one sees that player. And so I was trying to tell him, like, you have got to look. So I pulled him over at halftime, and I told him, I said, everybody stare at the ball. Everybody look at the ball. And so so they're all standing in this huddle, you know, and they're like, what? And I said, no. They're all looking around. I'm like, no. Everybody stare at the ball. You have to stare at the ball. I laid a ball right on the ground in front of them. Look at the ball, because this is what you're doing on the soccer field. You're all looking at the ball. Keep looking at it. And then I asked a couple of them, I said, so what do you see right now? And one of them said, nothing but the ball. And I said, bingo. Most of what's happening that's important is not happening where the ball is, it's happening away from the ball. And my meta lesson I was trying to get across to them is to look around. To look around. Coaches do all kinds of other things for us. They don't just provide, but I was, I was thinking, I was trying to develop leader capacity in these high school kids, saying, like, you're going to need to look around for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like, think bigger than just what you think is important right in front of you. Do you see the other people around you? But coaches provide so much more. They provide inspiration. They inspired us to learn and to improve. They provide correction. They corrected us when we did it wrong. They were honest. They had this shared value where they were, as a coach, I was getting something out of it. It was very life-giving to me, but also I was hoping to give something to the players. They gave us connection, a chance to be a part of something. I think about the coaches in my life. They were very differentiated. They had, my best coaches, if I think about them, they were really emotionally mature individuals. They had this crazy capacity to both listen and instruct. You know what I'm saying? To both listen and instruct. One of the reasons that I will default and I will try to push us toward listening is that most of us don't listen very well. A lot of managers instruct much better than they listen, but the best coaches do a little bit of both. They do a little bit of both. They also, beyond that, they had a presence. The best coaches, all of them modeled something about how to be in our world and that intersection. Like when people, you hear people all the time who are just in tears because their coach just passed away. And when they describe those people, they have all these characteristics. They have that kind of presence with us. I wrote down number 10, I wrote love. And what I mean by that is that they saw us. They saw us. And then number 11 is this, is that they provided a structure for practice, a safe place to practice and to do repetitions. It's amazing to think about that. So it's fascinating to compare this with mentoring. And one of the things I just want to mention is this, is that so often we divide these things. We say they're different roles. And I would say that in many cases they are, but they share a lot. Mentoring and coaching share a lot. And I want to highlight just a couple of these things. All right. So what do they share? That coaches and mentors, if you look up the definitions, they actually almost have the same definition. They're an advising, teaching role in our lives. So one of the things that they share is like this whole concept of questions and advice. And I think I know for some of you, this is counter to some of the coaching like training and some of the training that's out there is that coaches don't do that. But I think in reality, some of them do. But they share that. They also share a primary focus on the investee. And what I mean by that is, as a manager who might be becoming a better coach or mentor, that there would be this primary focus on the person, that sacrificial investment in that person. They do share, I think one of the things that they share is a specific context to the relationship. So life coach, executive coach, career mentor, marriage mentor, that they share that kind of, typically there's that definition. But they're both valuable and non-orthogonal. And I'm throwing that out for some of you scientists out there, but meaning that there is crossover in these roles. But let me tell you how they're different. Mentors typically, I would suggest to you that the difference is less about what the person does and more about the context within which our relationship to them occurs. And so, for example, mentors are not often hired. Typically, they have specific expertise related to the skill set or the desired skill set of the person being invested in. And it's interesting too, because it's typically, the research would say, unhelpful this is why like matching up mentors and mentees, unless they choose it, can be that doesn't work very well. This is a relationship where there's a mutual choice to be together and to have that kind of relationship. And they need to perceive the match. But the mentor has an investment to make. Now, when the coach on the other side, oftentimes these days, it's less crucial that they have the exact experience the invested is seeking to develop. So we would say a great coach does not have to necessarily have experience in the tech industry to coach a tech executive. It's not necessarily true. And in fact, a lot of people with that experience mentoring people in our lives oftentimes may not be great coaches in that way, because there's more going on than that. A manager could seek to become or maybe assigned the role of being a better coach, but it's much more difficult to assign a manager or even for them to proclaim like, I'm your mentor. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, it's become a coaching voice is different. So in many coaches, the difference is The mentor has an investment to make. The coach has a job to do. Oftentimes the coach has a job to do, but what they share is this investment in someone else. And I would say this is why the reason I think sometimes we focus on what's the difference between a mentor and a coach, when in fact, I'd like us to just think about how do I make a better investment in other people? You know what I mean? Like if we were doing that job better, then let's talk about the difference between these two things. It is important. Don't hear me saying that, but here's a couple of things I want to just dive into the research for just a moment. What do we know about investment relationships that makes them powerful? Here's some of the research. 25% of the time, a role model is a key experience, a key investment relationship, someone who modeled something for you. And here's what's crazy is that half the time it was a bad one. So like bad role models are actually making an investment in us without knowing it because they're giving us example for how not to do it. Here's what's also interesting. 80% of the time when someone said this was a valuable investment in me relationally, 80% of the time it wasn't their manager. And I'm not saying if you're a manager, it doesn't mean it's important. I'm just saying like, we've got to be open to all kinds of ways that we get this kind of investment. It was ongoing support. But let me tell you what the research says that people value in terms of personal qualities. They want openness, they want honesty, they want empathy, they want trust, and they want someone that will listen to them. That's what the research says. They also, in terms of the person's presence, they want what they just often described as knowing engagement. So in other words, people would say like, this person read me like a book, like that we actually see someone. So as we get into this, I wanted to give you an example of what WiLD coaches look like as a way to think about how to increase your coaching capacity. And then we'll get out into our breakouts and have a conversation about this. We describe a WiLD coach as a person with the heart of a therapist and the savvy of an executive, but they likely have been neither. Let me say that again. We describe a WiLD coach as someone who has the heart of a therapist and the savvy of an executive, but they likely have been neither. And they may have been one of the other two, either or both of those things, but like a lot of times they're not. On the therapist side, what's interesting is they tend to bring a sophisticated sense of care. They bring a capacity to ask questions that are important, and they also hold dissonance with people. They tend to be, on the therapist side, they tend to be people who understand their own developmental challenges, and that's why a lot of clinical programs end up putting people in training through therapy. They understand those and see those things in themselves. On the executive side, where I said they bring the savvy of an executive, they understand organizational complexity. They understand the burden of leaders. They understand their own leadership competencies, and they understand the necessity for structure, strategy, systems, and execution. But they may not have done it in the context that they're coaching in, and that's okay. A lot of times. So here's the thing. I want to give you just one other thing in terms of. So Rob, that's a lot of thinking about. So how do I use all that? I want to give you just very quickly a couple of pieces of advice, things that might help each of us. I'm trying to lean into these all the time in terms of behaviors. What does it look like to do great coaching as a manager? And I think it applies whether you're an executive coach or a manager. These things apply. The first one is ask open-ended questions. And there's a statement of that. Ask questions, right? The litmus test for that is when someone says, that's a great question, and then they pause. You will know you are over the target when they say that. The second thing is ask, don't advise. I'm sorry, let me change that. Ask, don't only advise. Ask, don't only advise. The litmus test for this is that the person talks more than you do. They talk more than you do. Number 3, encourage constructive dissonance. Be okay that people need to process and think with the hard questions. And the litmus test for that is someone says, I don't know. So in letting that be. Number 4, leave room for silence. The litmus test is that you'll feel a little discomfort and you will not move toward the compulsion of filling the void of silence. Like, let it be. Those are a couple things. And the last thing is it's okay not to have answers. Answers are only part of the solution that any individual is working on. And I think if we started to just lean into those things, we might become better coaches. It might possibly that we could do that. So let's get in these breakouts and go get smarter together.